Hey guys, what's going on? It's If You Have to Pick Three. I'm Matt.
And I'm Zack.
And if you haven't joined us for one of these episodes before, we are tasked with the job of picking three of something. 3 songs, 3 albums. There's a caveat. There's a final list, and in that final list, we have to pick out of our 6 entries. So Zack, let's go ahead. Let's start our new list here. What are we picking from today?
Well, Matt, this is going to be hard to believe, but February marks 50 years since a little band from Birmingham called Black Sabbath released their self-titled debut. I don't think you need 2 music nerds like us to tell you how influential this moment is. But really, Black Sabbath are the godfathers and innovators of metal as we know it. And they are still one of the most influential bands on hard rock as a genre completely, not just heavy metal. So, to celebrate the first album, I think we should debate what are the 3 best Black Sabbath songs of all time.
That are not Iron Man.
Yes, because as great of a song as that is, let's admit it, it's a little overplayed. It's a little overplayed.
Yeah, it is.
So,
There are so many better songs.
Matthew,
Zachary.
I'll let you go first.
All right. So I'm going to go with, I think, one of the quintessential songs that if you claim to like Sabbath or you want to get into Sabbath and you said to somebody who knew nothing of Sabbath, well, what should I listen to? Well, this would be one of the songs that you pick. Number 1 for me is going to be War Pigs. Absolutely classic song. And, you know, it kind of rings true, all the lyrics in the song. Nowadays, especially, you know, with how politically charged everything is getting, I mean, that song, it's a timeless song that, you know, when some bands do political, it's just in the moment, like when George Bush was president, everybody kind of just jumped on the bandwagon and, you know, was just trying to cram it down your throats that they didn't like George Bush and you knew it's about George Bush. This is not that. It's political in a completely different way, and it works. So it's a timeless classic, and even seeing when we saw Ozzy, Zakk Wylde was walking around the arena playing the guitar in the solo. It was incredible to see that song being performed live. Number 1 for me is going to be War Pigs.
Woo!
Number 2. Now, we had a stipulation that it didn't have to be Iron Man. You didn't say anything about a stipulation that it had to be Ozzy.
What?
Because I feel to encapsulate everything that Sabbath was and is, you need to talk about Ronnie James Dio.
Ooh.
It's a completely different side of Sabbath. I would say in certain aspects, it might even be better than the original version of Sabbath.
What?
So what we're going to...
How does everyone like the noise effects, by the way? We digging them? Comment on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram if you like Zach's weird, wacky noises. Continue.
Way to take away from my build-up here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the first album that Ronnie James Dio was on back in 1980. We're going to go with the title track of Heaven and Hell.
Oof, which is going to be celebrating its 40th anniversary.
Which is, I love the vibe and the feeling on this track. It is such a good track. And it really kind of highlights, once again, it almost has like that War Pig-ish type of vibe where it's kind of slow and kind of brooding. And then Dio's voice on it just comes in. And if anybody could ever take over for Ozzy, you would need another legendary singer. And Dio is that legendary singer. And it just feels very much so less horror, but still kind of almost in like a fantasy vein.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've never heard this because, it's not Ozzy Sabbath, listen to it. This is by far one of my, obviously it's on my list, it's one of my favorite songs that Sabbath ever did. All right, so
that's number 3. You just threw a huge curveball with a Dio song.
That's number 2.
Sorry, number 2. But now on to number 3.
On to number 3. So this one is going to be a little bit of a deeper cut. I love this song, and I listen to Sabbath a lot, but back in college, I was still kind of listening to all like the mainstays. Then I listened to the first album in its entirety, and I really found one of my other favorite songs because it was so, I don't want to say so different because it was on the first album, but it was so different because there's a harmonica in it. There's not a
Mm-hmm.
lot of harmonica in Sabbath at all. So hearing that, and then just it changed up the mood a little bit, because with the opening track they were kind of going for that horror movie feel. They've said that in interviews over the years, that that's what they were kind of going for, like a soundtrack to a horror movie. But this one actually, it sounded like a like almost like a hiking song,
Mm.
because the wizard walks by, and that's the third song. It's the wizard. It is. I don't. It's just such a different Sabbath song, and I love it. And a lot of people are probably going, "What? Why?" For everything I just said and more. But I mean, songs like "Sweet Leaf" or "Behind the Wall of Sleep," they're good. They just don't have that standout moment like this song does to me. I mean, it's almost interesting to me how much this song stands out against everything else at Sabbath just because of a harmonica. So there you go.
All
Three
right.
songs:
There
War
you go.
Pigs, Heaven and Hell, and The Wizard.
All phenomenal songs. But now it's my turn.
Do it.
All right. First song off of the first album. While everyone goes to the aptly named Black Sabbath song as what kind of ended up really defining what a whole genre of music would end up being, I always loved the song N.I.B. I think that is probably what really ended up cementing what Sabbath would become. To me, it's like, all right, if I have to find a song that defines what Sabbath sounds like, it's either going to be War Pigs, as you said, or N.I.B. That bass intro from Geezer, to the riff, to the jamming throughout the song, and Ozzy's voice, it literally sounds like Lucifer's anthem. And it's just so dark, it's so heavy, it's so groovy. It's such a phenomenal song, and it really just set the tone for what you could expect from Sabbath. So N.I.B. first song.
If you've never heard the solo redone by Primus, it's actually a really good rendition.
That cover in general that Primus did with Ozzy for the Nativity in Black 2. I always kind of like, if I was ever to be a wrestler, that would probably be my like entrance into the ring, is that cover.
Mm-hmm.
But the original, of course, is a classic too. I mean, Iommi's riffs is just so cool. All right, so that is number one. Number two, I'm going to do a little bit of a deep cut. This one was actually a little bit tougher because I love the album Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, and I actually love the title track. It's one of my favorites, but I'm actually going instead for a deep cut off of Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. Sabra Cadabra. Now, you might be more familiar with Metallica's cover that they did for Garage Inc. But the original, while it was a little bit more of a separation, it captured how the band could be a really fun blues band and a little jammy in the intro. A little bit more upbeat than what you're typically used to, and a little jangly even, than what you're used to hearing of Black Sabbath. But then the outro is just the most sinister, groovy jam with Iommi soloing and riffs and the little piano that just kind of like underlies everything. It really captures how, in the end of the day, Black Sabbath was such a tight unit of a group that the four of them, or any, a keyboardist or anyone who was in there, when they jammed, they just really were tighter than anyone else. So I think Sabra Cadabra is a great example of that. Third and final. Well, Matt.
Well, Zach.
You stole my thunder.
Yeah.
You were like, oh, I'm going to shake up the system and choose a Dio era song. Well, I was going to as well.
Would you say that you've been thunderstruck?
That's the AC/DC episode. Come on.
Damn it, I knew I mixed the scripts up.
Come on. Ugh.
Bush League.
Bush League, damn it. Dehumanizer over here. That's a Black Sabbath pun.
The fact that you had to call it out doesn't make it a good one.
I mean, it's the album that no one really remembers that well. Anyway, good album though. I also chose a Dio era song because, yes, while it definitely wasn't as held in high regard as the Ozzy era, the songs that they recorded with Dio were so strong. And I was always so happy that they reformed under the Heaven and Hell banner instead of just as Black Sabbath in the late 2000s, because it really gave them a chance to just shine and remind people, yeah, we wrote some great songs, and yeah, we wore a tight band with Dio and not just the Ozzy. And it also helped them just focus on that without having to revisit War Pigs or revisit Iron Maiden with Dio singing, even though that was pretty cool too. So you chose the title track of Heaven and Hell.
Yep.
I'm choosing a different song. I'm choosing Die Young. It's a little bit more faster, but it kind of showed a little bit more of the power metal-y kind of aspects of Black Sabbath with Dio in front, and his vocals are just so phenomenal on it. It's just a kick-ass song, and it really was the big FU statement that they needed to prove, no, we still got it. Yeah, we lost Ozzy, but we needed a new look on life, essentially. Because as much as we love Ozzy era music, let's be honest, the last two albums that he did of Ozzy before he left, before they split with him toward the end of the 70s, it was rough. There was not a lot of great stuff on those albums.
Rough. I'd say that's like falling off of a mountain.
Or falling off the edge of the world. So they really needed a change, and Dio helped them with that. But yeah, I think Die Young is just really firing on all cylinders.
Young!
Can't you see the waiting in the air? So my three: N.I.B., Sabracadabra, and Die Young.
All right, so now we have to come together on a final three list. I'm glad that we both picked Dio songs because one of the Dio songs has to
No,
win.
it has to. I mean, yeah. The stuff that they recorded of Ozzy is just timeless and classic. Mm-hmm. Whereas the stuff that they recorded of Dio, some would disagree and argue that, no, of course the stuff is great. But it's definitely a little bit more underrated. And I think a big part of that also is, I mean, as soon as Ozzy kind of rejoined in the 90s, the publicity machine did a really great job at making you kind of forget that Dio was ever in the band. Sadly.
Oh yeah. Can I also throw in an honorable mention on this one?
Sure, and I'm going to do the same.
All right, because I had in my last position between the Wizard, I also threw in another song, and I really got when it came out back in '98. I really got into the live album that they put out. That was a really great live album. I normally don't like live albums.
Which one?
I think it was called. I think it was actually called Reunion. Yeah, it was Reunion.
Oh yes, okay. Sorry, because they did a few live albums.
No, it was the one called Reunion with the two like winged devil girls on the front.
I had a T-shirt with that on it, and I loved that T-shirt.
But at the end of it, they actually put on a couple of other songs that weren't live, and one of them was Psycho Man.
The lyrics were a little rough, but that music-wise was really cool.
Oh, it was really dark, and it was really heavy. But yeah, the lyrics were kind of but it was a real good song.
While we're talking about later era Sabbath, thoughts on 13, the album that they released. It was Iommi, Geezer, and Ozzy with Brad Wilk on drums. Their quote-unquote big reunion album.
It was okay. It wasn't great. I see where they were going with it. They were definitely going for an older Sabbath vibe. And I think that they succeeded for the most part. It's just, once again, an older band trying to do something, either trying to recapture their youth or trying to get back into like the minds of the youth. But obviously, if you know Sabbath, you're probably going to be on the older side, or maybe it's not as influential nowadays. Well, that's to be debated at another time. But I feel like because they're trying to capture them back when they first formed, it feels almost a little bit overproduced for what they were trying to do. Because just like, and I hate to throw this analogy out there, but I'm going to anyway, when Metallica did Saint Anger, it was trying to be a very raw, very visceral, very just in-your-face attitude. And it was overproduced for trying to sound like a garage album. For this trying to sound like an old school Sabbath album with horror elements to it and just trying to be this very just dark album, it's produced and it feels on the bright side, if that makes sense to anybody but me. It was okay.
So it's funny you say about overproduced, because I revisited it recently. Because I remember at the time it came out and I liked it a lot, but I think also at the time it was like there was a lot of hype behind it, and in hindsight it's like, all right, this new shiny toy is in front of you, will it have aged over time? So I revisited it recently, and it's interesting because there was the album itself, and then they also had like 3 bonus tracks that they did like a deluxe version, which is such a weird thing you have to say nowadays because everything is just deluxe. Like, why would you separate it? Anyway, and like the first single, God Is Dead, and like the songs that were on the actual album itself, you listen to it, you're like, huh, they actually did a good job making Ozzy sound like he's singing and not auto-tuned. But then you listen to like the bonus tracks that, all right, so obviously they ran out of time with Rick Rubin, so he wasn't able to focus too much on the stuff that didn't make the quote final cut. And you can definitely hear where it's like, all right, I'm suddenly realizing that the album itself was very produced, which is a little sad because that's what made Sabbath so great, was that it sounded like a band in the studio jamming. And they did a good job making it sound kind of like that. But then once you kind of listen to like the outtakes that weren't as like touched on as the rest of the album, you realized, oh, a lot of work went into that behind the board. And then you suddenly realize, oh, maybe this isn't as great as I remembered it being.
But to me, the idea of, and I said, like I just said, the idea of any band trying to recapture what they were, it's either you need to do it the way you used to do it, like just everybody in the studio, even like almost Foo Fighters-esque with like analog tape recording and production and things like that, just to get that sound, or you try to evolve your sound to be something more modern. It doesn't really work well when you try to mesh the old with the new, just because of the way that everything is now and how digital and how it's going to come across, because it is going to come across as that overproduction or that brighter sound, because let's face it, this is a pop world now and everything is trending towards, oh, let everybody be happy because that's what everybody wants to hear, and nobody wants to hear the dark side of music. And, when in actuality, those are your most hardcore music fans, the ones that are going to trend toward the darker side of music.
Did you ever listen to Heaven and Hell's album, The Devil You Know?
I did. I don't remember it that well.
So, and admittedly, it's been a while since I listened to that, but while I would argue that 13 had more memorable songs, The Devil You Know did a better job capturing what the Heaven and Hell era of Black Sabbath sounded like, if that makes sense.
It does. And I remember very vividly getting that album and just being enthralled with it when it came out, because I did hear some Dio era Sabbath songs before this came out. They weren't like,
Yeah.
But listening to that got me back into going back to that era, and I remember really diving deep into Heaven and Hell, the album at that point. Yeah. And it was just such a great moment to listen to something that was that well done. And it wasn't Ozzy with Sabbath.
I will say, going back to the Heaven and Hell lineup too, like they did, like everyone will always go, oh, no doubt Heaven and Hell, that album was great. But even Mob Rules, while it definitely wasn't as much of a classic as its predecessor, there's some great songs on there like Falling Off the Edge of the World, and even Mob Rules, the title track. And then even Dehumanizer, their reunion album, their 92 reunion album. I always thought TV Crimes was a fun song. Something about it was just kind of quick and to the point. And then I
That's
is
a good
such
song.
a heavy song that doesn't get enough credit too.
And
So like if I can give like an honorary mention, that song, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, and Fairies Wear Boots, like that's just a classic that showed their jazz capabilities too.
And then I don't know if this was a song that was done specifically for that Heaven and Hell album, but Adam and Evil.
Love that song.
That is such a good song.
That, honestly, I hate to say it, but that's the song that I still vividly remember. But that song is so satanic sounding, and you just feel like you're slowly getting dragged into hell by listening to that. So good.
That was probably the highlight of that album.
Yes, I was. In fact, because whenever I think of that album, I actually almost forgot the name of the album, but I remember Adam and Evil.
Yes.
But back to the original. So here, just a recap for everyone, because we went on a bit of a sidetrack rant. Matt, your songs were War Pigs, Heaven and Hell, and The Wizard.
Yes.
Mine were Die Young, N.I.B., and Sabba Cadabra. So, I have a proposition. A world-famous Zack proposition. Here's the three that we agree on.
Oh, here's the three that we agree on that you picked, huh?
War Pigs. You're
Yeah.
gonna like this,
Okay,
asshole.
Go ahead, War Pigs.
War Pigs,
Yep.
Heaven and Hell,
Okay.
N.I.B. It's a good
Yeah, we'll
deal.
go with that.
It's a good deal. You got 2 out of the 3 songs.
Yeah, we'll go with that. I can't argue with that because while The Wizard is a great song, it's just not. It's not the classics. And
do 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 do.
Right.
do,
It was nothing groundbreaking
do,
like
do,
that.
Do 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 do.
That was the bass solo. If you didn't know.
Yeah. I think everyone all agreed and said, "Wow, Zack nailed it." Did he have a bass in the studio that they recorded the podcast in?
It's a pink bass.
It's
It's actually shaped like Hello Kitty.
Yeah, really great tone on it. So that means that the final 3 best Black Sabbath songs of all time: War Pigs, Heaven and Hell, and N.I.B. Do you agree? Let us know. Yeah, do you? Well, there's one way you can let us know if you agree or not. You can comment on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram,
Wherever fine podcasts are found.
Friendster, at Epic Footnote. Tell us what you would call the best 3 Black Sabbath songs of all time. And we hope that you listen to another episode from us in the very near future. Thanks so much for listening, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Take it easy.